we have burnout because we're approaching the production and I'm building. So Walter and his courage had said, let's go, let's greenlight the movie. I said, I'll come in, I'll do this, but you have to greenlight. He said, oh, okay. I said, fine. So he greenlit before we'd had a script down, which I thought was pretty brave.
Actually, we committed to do this movie with very little evidence that we could do the movie, but there was very much a shared sense, an idea, an image in everyone's head of what this movie could be.
It's interesting because now you're under full pressure. You've got to get it right. So there's no choices. I mean, we sat around the table days and days and days. Literally, if you're coming in, so barrier against the wall in the story, and the writer was there being grilled, and everybody's putting their brains together because everybody wants to make it right.
In these intense script meetings, Laurie MacDonald was the only female.
There had been a series of meetings that she was not able to go to because of responsibilities she had with our kids. And during those meetings, we came up with a wonderful idea for the third act, which was that about 20 pages before the end, Maximus would come back and find Lucilla has committed suicide. We thought that would really motivate him to bring down Rome. And of course, Laurie came back and was aghast. You just literally, there's one female connection to this entire movie, and you've just killed her. Good work, guys.
Probably the most bitter adjustment in the script for Ridley was Ridley kept talking about this fantastic fight between Maximus and a rhino.
Well, I always wanted to do a rhinoceros, and I wanted a rhino in North Africa. I wanted to show something absolutely monumentally crazy rather than just more guys.
He storyboarded the fight. We all know what a ferocious animal a rhino is. And of course, you always go from, well, wouldn't it be cool if, and then you get the reality. We started to see videotape of trained rhinos around the world. And a rhino moves very slowly unless you get it so angry, and then it's unstoppable. And there's no in-between.
The whole rhino thing would have cost us $3 million. Because I'd have to build an animatronic, because animatronics are only part of the solution. I could build a perfect rhino head, full size, from me to you, on a ram, which will look absolutely real, will snap and gouge and ram its head through a wall. And you can probably build one that actually moves, but it's going to be limited. So you're going to need also a couple of good rhinos in there that'll function, real rhinos. But the big trick really is to do it CGI.
Needless to say, a CG rhino is incredibly expensive. I think the price tag then was about $1 million. So we were always struggling with budget, as all big movies do. And one day, the rhino dropped out of the story.
We got to the point where we were having a read-through in London. And since I was a producer, even though I was no longer the writer, they couldn't get rid of me. So I had nothing to lose by saying it was on my mind. So I said, we're having the read-through tomorrow. I said, but the script still doesn't work.
It was a collaboration that was not about compromise. There was no like, oh, okay, you think this, I think that, maybe we'll settle on that. No, people had extremely passionate points of view.
We just couldn't get it all to come together. So I sent the script to Bill Nicholson just as we were starting to do a reading with all the actors at Shepperton in London. And at that reading, everyone was aware that something wasn't quite right.
I was working with the producer, Doug Wick, on a quite separate project. And I got a phone call and he said, I have this project Gladiator and we have a problem. And the problem was that they just had a read-through. This was 2 weeks before the start of principal photography. They'd had a read-through with the cast and it had not gone well.
Bill Nicholson sent me, faxed me, a 4-page memo that was a pretty brilliant analysis of what was missing.
I wrote a couple of pages back to him saying what I thought needed to happen to the script. And he sent those to Walter Parkes, who was the boss at DreamWorks, who was very, very much involved with Gladiator all the way through. Very important guy on Gladiator. Walter read the notes and he said, get this guy on board, pay him whatever it takes. So Doug came back to me and said, would you be prepared to do a little work on this, maybe a couple of weeks' work, and it's a production rewrite. Now that's how it began. I was on it to the end. I was on it for the next 15 weeks.
So we brought Bill in, and he kind of went the final distance and really pulled that third act together and sort of Maximus' death to joining his family in the next life.
The script that I read was like a revenge movie. It was quite dark. The main character became very nihilistic. There was quite a lot of confusion in the plotting in the second half. And I know that Ridley and Doug and Walter wanted the plot sorted out, and they wanted the characters made more likable. I mean, that's not to say that they weren't likable, but they wanted more. And that's what I wanted. I mean, I'm not an action writer. You don't hire me to write fight sequences. The fight sequences were there. They were storyboarded. They were even starting to shoot them. My job was character and structure. The key thing I identified was, this is a story of a man who wants to kill somebody. And I personally don't want to go and see a movie about somebody who wants to kill somebody. I want to go and see a movie about somebody who loves somebody. And so I thought to myself, who does he love? Given that he's going to die at the end of the movie, that was the structure I inherited. Who does he love? He loves his wife and child. How can I create a plot for this story that means that his drive is to be with the people he loves rather than to slaughter a monster? The slaughtering of the monster is good, I'm not against that. It's just not the end of the story for me. Not unless you're making, I think, a lower grade movie. So the obvious answer was an afterlife.
I do think the seeds of this connection to Elysium were there. It was almost like too close for any of us to actually see. And which is why, you know, sometimes it takes that fresh set of eyes. It took Bill, having nothing to do with this, reading the script with no background whatsoever, to say, well, this is very interesting, but my Lord, this is rather depressing. He dies at the end. How can we possibly come up with something so that, you know, you feel that in his death he's achieved something?
We thread this through the movie so that his actual aim is to rejoin his beloved wife and child in the next life, and in that way, the act of dying becomes an act of winning, an act of triumph.
And almost like an archaeologist, an emotional archaeologist, he found the beginnings of all this in John's draft, this kind of sense of connection to the afterworld. But what was so brilliant was to decide to fully portray it, not just in dialogue, but actually visually. And of course, what that gave us, you know, as rendered by Ridley, was a hero's death at the end, which was, you know, as satisfying as a happy ending.